If you want to find out how you can win this Pennywise keychain, then stick around to the end of this video. The moment we've all been waiting for since 129 minutes into the first movie has arrived, and basically 12 videos and one terrible song later, it's Chapter 2, Happy Death Day to you! It's Chapter 2 is here, so let's take a look at the things you missed. The movie opens with a shot from the first film, Beverly Marsh floating after being abducted by Pennywise, which suggests that this event has a greater significance than we previously realized. We later find out that because Beverly looked into the deadlights as a kid, she has the ability to see things that the others cannot, which is hinted at in the last scene.
I saw us, all of us, together back in the cistern, but we were older. Our parents' ages. I just remember how we felt. How scared we were. I don't think I can ever forget that.
We then see an extended version of that scene where Stan the Man asks what he looks like as an adult. And if you look at Beverly's reaction, she looks sad for a moment before lying to him, saying that he'll be the same but taller. We all know what happens to Stan. Nope, no, put that down. We then flash forward to Derry in 2016, which is the most modern depiction of the fictional town that appears in many of Stephen King's works. The Derry Canal Days festival is going on, and three anti-gay teens harass a couple, Adrian Mellon and Don Haggerty. The movie shows how Adrian ended up with the I Heart Derry hat, which in the book is the item that sets Adrian's attacker over the edge, no pun intended. The scene is also inspired by a real crime that occurred in the 80s while the book was being written. The way the three attackers act is very similar to how Henry Bowers and his gang of bullies behave in the first film, and that may be a clue about how the phenomenon of violence that Mike Hanlon calls the Derry disease is now impacting a new generation of teens. Mellon is thrown off the bridge, and Pennywise secretly makes his appearance in the background for a brief moment while Mellon pops up for air. In the next scene, we see Mike Hanlon hearing the news of the crime over police scanners, and I noticed a photograph of his uncle from the first movie. The uncle takes over the role his father played in the novel, so I think it's reasonable to assume that he probably passed away in a similar manner during the 27-year gap, which may be the reason Mike decides to stay in Derry and investigate more about why bad things happen so often in this town. The next Losers Club member we meet is Bill, who's on set filming a movie adaptation of Attic Room. In the novel, The Black Rapids is the name of the book that gets made into a movie, and Attic Room is actually Bill's first original screenplay. The change may have been made because each one of Bill's stories represents one of his experiences in Derry, and Attic Room would have been inspired by the events at 29 Neibolt Street, which are focused on much more in the first movie. They're shooting Attic Room on the Warner Brothers lot, and conversely, you can go to the Warner Brothers lot right now and you'll see this.
It's almost as if they want people to go see this movie.
The director is a real-life director, Peter Bogdanovich, likely because the director of It, Andy Muschietti, is a fan. The next adult loser we meet is Eddie. You probably noticed that his wife, Myra, looks exactly like his mom from the first movie, but if you haven't read the book, you might not get the joke. Eddie realizes the woman he married is basically exactly like his mother when he finds an old photo of his mom. He looks from mother to Myra and then back again to mother. They could have been sisters. The resemblance was that close. The movie takes it a step further by literally using the same actress for both characters. In the new movie, Eddie is a risk assessment specialist for an insurance company, but the fact that he gets in a car accident when he receives the call from Mike Hanlon is a slight nod to his limo driver career in the book. After Richie, we meet Ben, who's now an architect. He's in a meeting with his associates where he makes an argument for an open floor plan, telling them if you throw up walls, it feels like a prison. The point is to bring people together. Whether he remembers it or not, the reason he feels this way is because he's felt the power of unity before, when he and his friends came together to defeat Pennywise.
This is what it wants. It wants to divide us. We were all together when we heard it. That's why we're still alive.
Ben also compares the office building to a clubhouse, a hint that we would finally see the clubhouse in the Barrens that was left out of both adaptations so far. When we see the exterior shot of Ben's home office, there's a turtle statue, a reference to the entity known as the Turtle in the book, which is essentially the rival of It, who gives the Losers Club small helping hands along the way. The turtle is referenced a few times in the first film and would be referenced again later in Chapter 2, when a turtle can be spotted on the desk during Ben's classroom scene. The turtle, like It, is a cosmic entity, and on cue, the camera tilts up to the stars, perhaps a hint that the interdimensional origins of It will further be explained in this film. The shot transitions into Stan's living room, where Mr. Urus is doing a bird puzzle, little nod to Stanley's hobby in the book, bird watching. Stan takes his life when hearing about It's return, and the blood dripping off his hand transitions to a leak dripping onto Beverly, which is exactly what happened to Bill's drawing of Beverly in the first one, which, by the way, leaks through 3 holes in the ceiling. And later in Chapter 2, the 3 balls of light that represent the deadlights come down into the chamber from above. At the end of the sequence, we see what happens happened to Henry Bowers, and although we don't see how he survived the fall down the well, we do see his arrest for the murder of his father, and the guy who slaps the cuffs on him has a name tag reading Borton. Chief Borton plays a pretty big role in the book, namely interrogating the father of the Corcoran brothers after the death of one and the disappearance of the other. Adult Henry is driven into a mad fit of laughter after seeing a red balloon floating outside the asylum that he now resides in, and is taken to his room, where another connection to King's novel can be spotted in the background. Near Henry's bed in the room, there are several pictures of the moon pinned up to the wall, and I'm like 99% sure that one of them was the moon from Termina in Majora's Mask, but the reason for these moons is that in the novel, it manipulates Henry by giving him orders from what Henry perceives to be a voice coming from the moon.
Henry Bowers.
So Zombie Patrick breaks Henry out of Juniper Hills, and later that night, the adult versions of our cast are reconvening.
This meeting of the Losers Club has officially begun.
When Eddie's walking in, he's in the middle of explaining something to the waitress. He says, if I eat a cashew, I could realistically die. The pause before he says those last two words foreshadows the fact that Eddie is the next character to kick the bucket. The group gets to talking about Bill's career as a writer, and we find out that Attic Room wasn't his first movie adaptation, a situation that mirrors the scenario of adaptations of It in real life. The movie is telling us that this may not be the first time that someone has decided to tackle King's 1986 novel, but things are gonna go differently this time around, especially with everyone Bill meets telling him that they love his writing, but he needs to work on his endings. When they eventually get around to talking about It, the cycle of the monster is described as an echo that comes back every 27 years. I find this word choice interesting because one of the new forms that the creature takes is a bat, and bats of course rely on echo communication to get around. The idea of bats being one of the forms is new for this version, although there is a vampire form that Ben sees briefly in the novel. Mike tries to explain the horrors that have gone down this past summer to the others, and briefly mentions the name Lisa Albrecht. Like Chief Borton, this is another subtle reference to the expanded events of the book, where It takes out this young girl on the anniversary of Georgie's death to try to send a message to Mike. It manipulates the fortune cookies, first to give the clue about Stanley's death, and then to use their own fears against them. We see that the bat is one of these. Richie gets the crawling eyeball with tentacles, an homage to his fear of a horror movie called The Crawling Eye. Mike's cookie hatches into a bird, a connection to the giant bird that attacked him in the book, and a bird that attacked him in his crib as an infant. Beverly spurts out blood, a reminder of her bathroom sink that spouts blood that only the kids can see. Then there's this mutated insect with a baby's head. This is a combination of Eddie's problem in the book, where he can't get rid of the crickets in his basement, and the problem of infertility. All 7 members of the Losers Club are unable to conceive a baby as adults.
Any little crumb snatches for you, Richie?
None that I know of.
While everyone is still undecided on if they want to stay and fight, It makes the next move, luring a young girl from the bleachers of a Little League game using a lightning bug, a form that again could be connected to the Deadlights. The girl's name, Victoria, does not line up with one of the victims in the book, but it may be a little homage to the original It, the 1990 TV miniseries.
Who are you?
The encounter is very similar to the Georgie scene in chapter 1, in that Pennywise lures her in with something that she wants, in this case removing the scar from her face. He says that he's gonna do it on a count of 3, but the count ends after reaching 2, much like how It ends after chapter 2. That evening, Mike takes Bill to the library, and in the background there's a circus poster with Pennywise on it, though it's not clear to me yet if this is a part of It influencing the town, or part of Mike's research into Derry. I did spot a book that Mike had been looking into on his desk, A History of Old Derry by Branson Budinger. This is the same book that Ben checks out in the library in the first one, and the author is a character from the novel It. Budinger, who had died in 1950, was a historian who Mike learns of from a former Derry librarian, who tries persuading Mike not to look into Derry's past. After publishing the book, A History of Old Derry, which exposed the violent pattern of the town's past, Budinger was found dead by his own hand. But like all of the tragedies in this town, something prevents the story from picking up significant news coverage. Another book that I noticed in Mike's study was called Pillar in the Sky. It may be a reference to The Dark Tower, a series of Stephen King books that expand on the mythology of deities such as the turtle. Mike has Bill perform the smoke hole ceremony. In the book, the 7 of them do this as kids, but only Richie and Mike have the vision about the arrival of It. But in the movie, Bill is able to see the abstract vision of the 3 beacons of light, which match what Beverly saw in the first movie, and It, which shapeshifts into a couple of different forms, such as Mike's giant bird and the spider creature that they see at the end. After Bill seeing this vision and Beverly telling of the nightmare she had of their deaths, the group decides to stay and fight back against It, and Mike takes them back to the Barrens, where they come across their old clubhouse. In the flashback, they wear surgical caps while in the clubhouse to prevent spiders from getting in their hair, to which Richie asks if they're really going to be afraid of spiders. In the end, overcoming their fear of the spider form of Pennywise is how they ultimately defeat It. Mike gives them the mission to find the artifacts of their past throughout Derry, during which there are more flashbacks, like Beverly's abusive father covering her with her late mother's perfume. The scene reminds me a lot of this one line from the book, in which Beverly Beverly describes her dad's increasing willingness to raise his hands against her. It was as if there was a smell they made between them, a smell that wasn't there when she was in the apartment alone, one that had never been there when they were in it together, not until this summer. And when Mom was gone, it got worse. If there was a smell, some smell, then he knew it too, because Bev saw less and less of him as the hot weather wore on. Beverly goes back to her old apartment where Mrs. Kirsch now lives. She notices something is off when she spots the holes on Mrs. Kirsch's chest, a lasting injury from where Ben stabbed the monster with the fire poker 27 years ago. Rolls. The next thing Beverly notices is a photo of Mrs. Kirsch and her father.
My father joined the circus.
And aside from the familiar facial features of this man, there's also a familiar looking trailer in the background. The next flashback would come from Richie, who revisits the old movie theater arcade where an interesting detail can be found. The old movie theater has been closed down, with the marquee now simply reading, "Thanks for the memories." Which is kind of a shame because they could have put up posters for Warner Brothers movies from 2016 like Lights Out and The Conjuring 2. But instead, there's just an old Left Behind poster for You've Got Mail, which tells us that the theater probably closed in 1998, 9 years after the initial battle with Pennywise. Also, this is the second Meg Ryan reference so far, the first being Adrienne Mellon telling the bullies that Meg Ryan wants her wig back in the opening. Richie flashes back to a scene where he flees from Henry Bowers and takes a safe haven in city center, where he is attacked by the Paul Bunyan statue, who has bats flying out of his mouth, which explains the aforementioned fortune cookie with the bats. Then, in the present, Richie reads a flyer for his own funeral, which is either a callback to the missing poster from the first movie or the poster for Richie Hosier's All Dead Rock show from the book. Or both. Could be both. Meanwhile, Bill goes into a shop called Secondhand Rose, where he sees his old bike, Silver. The shopkeep is none other than Stephen King himself, which provides an interesting conversation, given that Bill as a character is already kind of an extension of Stephen King. It's almost as if King is having a conversation with an older version of himself, something that actually happens during the climax of the movie during the ritual of Chud. King also has a copy of The Black Rapids, the fictional Bill Denbrough book that I mentioned earlier. Bill tells the shopkeep that his old bike was fast enough to beat the devil, and the line is a direct reference to the chapter title, Bill Denbrough Beats the Devil, which is brought back as the tagline of the book's epilogue. Next, Bill revisits his old house, where a new family now lives. The son is a kid who rides a skateboard. The bottom of his board displays the carpet pattern seen outside of room 237 in The Shining. The skateboard kid does appear in the novel briefly. Bill tells him to be careful, to which he replies, "You can't be careful on a skateboard," a line that continues to come up in Bill's mind throughout the book. In the movie, Bill tells him to be careful, and the kid just looks back. Maybe I'm looking into it too much, but maybe this is Muschietti telling us that things are gonna go differently from here on out. And after seeing this thing, it's hard to say I can blame him. Ben searches for his artifact back at the high school. He flashes back to a scene that took place while the kids were back in school, after this fight but before defeating it. It's interesting how both movies added a scene of it taking the form of Beverly in order to try to trick Ben. As far as I can remember, there's nothing like that in the novel. In this version, however, before Ben kisses her, she turns into a monster with a flaming head. I believe this is it taunting him about the poem he had written her, turning the line, "Your hair is winter fire," into something literal. Also worth noting, this could be a reference to another creepy clown, Sweet Tooth from the Twisted Metal franchise. However, I don't think it was intentional because the scenes where Ben is a kid take place in 1989 and Twisted Metal wouldn't come out until 1995. Also, Ben saves himself by locking himself in a locker, a scene that is very similar to Creepy Clown's school lockdown epidemic. I might need to have my lawyers take a look into this one. And perhaps even more suspicious than that is in the next sequence, where Eddie stops in to pick up his prescription at Center Street Drug, and they somehow have me in the background browsing the aisles. Oh, wait, that's actually a cameo from the director, Andy Muschietti, which completes the trifecta of cameos, Bogdanovich, King, and Muschietti. If you were wondering if the woman behind the counter is Greta Keane, the same girl who writes Loser on Eddie's cast, she's still wearing the same necklace with the letter G. Eddie's flashback takes him to a scene where he's lured to the basement of the pharmacy when he hears his mother's voice crying for help. He looks behind the curtain to discover his mother tied up to a chair with a leper coming for her. Though this is only an illusion created by it, he's unable to save her. But this is a visual setup for when Eddie overcomes his fear of the horrors that are beyond the curtain later on as an adult, when he punctures through the shower curtain to kill his attacker, Henry Bowers. When I covered the first movie, one thing I pointed out was how Tim Curry's Pennywise from the miniseries adaptation of it makes a small cameo in the clown room. Chapter 2 continues that tradition when Bill makes his way through the haunted house in an attempt to rescue the skateboard kid. These swinging clown pendulums share the yellow suit, purple vest, parted tufts of red hair, and red rubber nose that can be found on Curry's Pennywise, whereas none of these features can be found on the new design for Bill Skarsgård's Pennywise. When he gets into the Hall of Mirrors, Pennywise appears for less than a second in the background during one of the strobes of light. After being unable to save the skateboard kid, Bill loses it and goes alone to the house where they had encountered it so many years before, 29 Neibolt Street. Just like when Bill foolishly ran off to face the threat alone as a child, his friends give chase to come aid him. They go inside, where they come up against a bit of a bridge between something that happens in the book and the second coming of something that happens in the first movie. In the first film, Pennywise comes out of this fridge to attack them. And in the book, they're having a discussion in the library, and it uses the form of Stan's head inside of the mini-fridge to taunt and frighten them.
Stan! Sorry I'm late. Well, let's see who's here.
So when the amazing Spider Stan comes out of the fridge, it does a good job of bringing those two worlds together. The idea of someone's head turning into a spider, and the line that Richie says when he sees it, is also a reference to John Carpenter's The Thing.
You gotta be f***ing kidding.
We also see the H on Ben's abdomen that Henry carved in the first movie reappear, this time spelling out the words "home at last." After another run-in with the monstrous version of Mrs. Kirsch, who apparently didn't get the memo about its catchphrase.
We'll float too.
No, not that one.
You lied. And I died.
No, the other one.
Time to float.
Yeah, that one. They end up finding a manhole in the cistern that leads them deeper into the sewers, and this is where they all must perform the smoke hole ritual together, in a scene that's filled with even more secrets. The matches that Mike uses to start the fire that begins the smoke hole ritual are from Jade of the Orient, the Chinese restaurant that they meet at for the reunion. The ritual of Chud begins, and this isn't a thing you missed, but I just feel the need to point out that I f***ing called it when I uploaded this video on May 25th. Roll it. I just think that they have to make a cooler looking arachnid than the one from 1990. Maybe instead of a giant spider, it's more of a half clown, half spider alien hybrid. Now I know what you're thinking, I should just mic drop and walk away. But the mic is actually up there, and I still have a few more things you missed, and I'm actually borrowing this mic at the moment, and I don't really want to risk breaking it. The point is, you owe me a like on this video or something. But anyway, each of the losers is thrown into their own personal scenarios where they must overcome Pennywise. For Beverly, she's thrown into the bathroom stall where she was bullied as a young girl, or at least some twisted version of it. The word smoke hole can briefly be seen written on the wall, and the blood that nearly drowns her is an extreme version of the blood that came out of her father's bathroom sink. In the first movie, it's a symbol for her struggles with reaching the age of puberty, but in this film, it's more of a reminder of the abuse that she endured as a child. And this is solidified by the fact that the characters that poke their heads into the bathroom stall are the three predatory characters that objectified her. Her father, the pharmacist, and Henry Bowers, who screams, "Here's Johnny," as he pokes his head around the door.
Here's Johnny!
I did a whole video on the connection between The Shining and It, which you can watch right here, or find the link in the description at the end of this video. Eddie and Richie encounter the set of 3 doors that terrified them in the first movie, and behind the first one, there's a pair of legs unattached to a body. If you remember in chapter 1, Bill and Richie open the door and see the severed upper body of their missing classmate, Betty Ripson. So I think that this kind of shows that they're in an inverse of that world. I also find it kind of funny that they actually didn't get the same actress back for this sequel, so the new actress is credited as Betty Ripson's legs. After everyone makes it out of their personal battles with it, Eddie finds his bravery and attacks the monster, which retaliates and seriously maims Eddie, leaving a smudge of clown makeup on his cheek. If you look closely, you can see the word "it," though I probably don't have the footage for this, so you have to go back and see the movie. When the losers get an advantage over it, the creature cycles among many of the forms, and you can tell that it's losing its touch when it briefly takes the form of the woman in the painting, which is Stan's fear. And he hasn't been around since like 15 minutes into the movie. To be fair though, that thing is pretty freaky, regardless of if you're Stan or not. After losing Eddie, the others are able to come together and finally put an end to the thing that has caused the horrors around Derry for all of these years, and they escape from the Neibolt house just before it collapses. This is a scaled down version of the way that the book ends, where an epic flood destroys Derry and symbolically purges all of the evil that had taken place there. So this was one thing that I was a little disappointed with for this movie. The storm scene would have been wild. But as I mentioned way back at the beginning of this video, it was well established that the movie was gonna do something different, because Bill Denbrough, who kind of represents Stephen King, is criticized for his story endings by his wife, Peter Bogdanovich, and basically everyone he meets along the way. So his next book, that we see him writing in the epilogue, has a more positive ending, and its chapter 2 follows suit. The town is not destroyed. The evil is conclusively vanquished, and the remaining members of the Losers Club don't lose their memories again when they leave Derry. Bill Denbrough does once again beat the devil, but this time it's a personal demon that he's overcoming. The ancient evil that for so long haunted Derry was now gone, but you still have a chance to have your very own evil entity in the form of this keychain. That's right, I'm giving this thing away, and here's how you can be entered to win it. First, follow CZsWorld on Instagram. Then find this post and leave a like. The winner will be selected at random. Full contest rules can be found in the video description. I think I'm gonna be vlogging more horror-related events on the Instagram from now on, so maybe you can even stick around and not just unfollow me after the giveaway, but that's your call. So that's it, pun intended. Of course, there may be a few things that I missed, so let me know what you might have noticed in the comments. And I'll probably do a follow-up episode once the movie comes out on Blu-ray, so I can really dig deep for any details that went under the radar in this video. So make sure you're subscribed to CZsWorld for new horrors every week, ring that death bell for notifications, and I'll see you in the next one. Assuming we both survive.